Mystery of Black Hollow Lane. Chapter 8, The Saint. The next few weeks were a blur. Get up, go to class, study. Eat lunch, go to class, study. It was exhausting. Researching her father's box seemed like a lost cause. Every once in a while she'd stare at the medallions or try and fit them together like a puzzle, but it never worked. That was as much research as she had time for. That school had become her whole life. She kept going to Latin society, even though nobody helped her with Latin. In fact, nobody talked to her at all. Other people had joined since she started, and most of them already seemed like part of the club. Malcolm and Brian made a point of chatting with almost every new boy, asking them questions and helping them fit in. Malcolm seemed to have a special status in the club. Everybody wanted to sit with him, like he was some kind of good luck charm. It was so different from Jack. He was so different from Jack. Outgoing, loud, always the center of attention. He was friendly with everybody in the club. Everybody except Emmy. She wondered whether he knew she was friends with his brother, and if that would even make a difference. On top of all that, her mum was sending almost daily messages badgering Emmy to work harder. Like that was even possible. She'd never worked so hard in her life. The worst part was her mum hadn't once mentioned her birthday. Birthdays had always been awkward. Emmy's dad had left on her third birthday, and her mum wanted to forget everything about that day. But turning 12 was a big deal, wasn't it? The morning of her birthday, Emmy met Lola in the common room. "So, today's the big day," Lola said with a grin. Emmy's cheeks felt flush. "How did you find out?" "In first year, like everyone else." Emmy looked blankly at Lola. "Wait, what are you talking about?" "It's St. Audrey's feast day. We get a proper feast tonight to honour our house's illustrious patron, St. Audrey." "Audrey was a saint?" Emmy asked. "Sure, all the houses are named after saints," Jack said as he sauntered down the Edmund staircase. "Edmund, Felix, Withberger, they were all saints from this part of England." Emmy nodded. She wondered where the name Withberger had come from. "Come on, I'm starving," Lola said. They hurried to the hall and filled their plates with food. They had just sat down when someone cleared his throat behind them. "Morning, Jack." Jack didn't turn around. "Hey, Malcolm." He stared right down and kept poking at the sausages on his plate. "This is from Dad." Malcolm handed Jack an envelope. "He asked me to give it to you when I went home last weekend." Jack looked up for the first time. "You went home for the weekend?" Emmy bit her lip. Why hadn't Jack been invited? The look on his face made her think Jack was wondering the same thing. "I had some business to take care of, for Dad." Jack's face went tight, like he was trying not to wince. "Right. Was that what you were doing when you and Dev fell off the chapter house?" Malcolm looked around and crouched down beside Jack. "Look, I didn't want him to come with me, okay? And it wasn't business. You think I'd let some kid come with me on business?" "Then what was he doing with you?" "I told you, it wasn't my idea. Somebody dared me to walk along the edge and, I don't know, somehow he just ended up coming with me. He got freaked out and lost his balance. I grabbed him and pushed him back onto the wider part of the roof, but then I fell." Jack looked down at his plate of sausages. "That's it? That's it. That's the whole story." Malcolm stared straight at his brother like he was ready for a challenge. "Fine," said Jack. Malcolm stood up and walked away. Emmy didn't know what to make of him or his awkward relationship with Jack. Classes went by slowly that day. She kept checking her phone for missed calls from her mom, but there was nothing. She just wanted to crawl into bed and wait for her birthday to be over. After the long walk back from Latin society, Emmy trudged up the Audrey stairs, opened the door to her room, and just about threw up. The smell was overwhelming. Victoria was sitting on Emmy's bed with 4 different nail polish bottles open on her nightstand. Her friend Arabella was sitting beside her, the dust from her nail file sprinkling over Emmy's bedspread. "Can't you do this somewhere else?" Emmy asked as she pulled her shirt up over her nose. Victoria smiled sweetly. "No." She carefully placed an open nail polish on Emmy's pillow. Emmy stared at the open bottle and shook her head. Oh, she had it with Victoria. "Get that stuff off my pillow." Victoria teetered toward Emmy, her freshly polished shoes curled up and away from the fuzzy carpet. like me. Her face was 2 inches away from Emmy's, and she stared straight into Emmy's eyes. Emmy stared straight back. Do it, she thought. She clenched her fists. Just this once, let me do it. She moved a little closer to Victoria. They were nose to nose. Get off my bed, Emmy gritted her teeth. Now! Victoria swallowed hard and glanced at Arabella, who was sitting stock still. Emmy smirked. They hadn't expected her to stand her ground. Fine, Victoria said, her voice cracking a little. She nodded to Arabella, who picked up the nail polish, put it on the cap, and tossed it and the nail file into Victoria's bed. Emmy took a deep breath and picked up her economics book. Maybe she could get a few more chapters read before dinner. She turned toward the door, but the heavy book slipped out of her fingers and landed right on, Victoria's toes. Victoria shrieked and grabbed her foot, hopping and lunging toward Emmy. She flew forward and landed face first on the floor. Emmy giggled and Victoria lunged from her hands and knees, her feet dragging on the fluffy white carpet. Your toes! Arabella screeched. A trail of pink goo streaked across the floor. Victoria screamed and flipped onto her back legs, flailing like a cockroach that couldn't find its feet. It took me an hour to get my toes just right. You did that on purpose. Oh, you little witch. I didn't even do anything. Oh, really? Was that an accident? Victoria sat up and grabbed the nail polish off her bed. Then I'm going to cause a little accident too. She swiped Emmy's economics textbook, wrenched open the bottle, and slowly tipped it upside down. No! Emmy yelled, but it was too late. Nail polish was dribbling down into the textbook, oozing between the pages. Oops! Victoria flipped through the book, making sure each page got a generous dollop of sticky pink polish. Had a little spill. And if you don't want me to have an accident with any of your other books, I'd suggest you get out of my room. Emmy pressed her lips together, then felt her shoulders slump. Oh, it's just not worth it. Just let go. Let her win again and again and again. She reached for the door handle and walked out. Bye-bye! A chorus of giggles ran out, and Emmy started to run. She ran downstairs and flew out the back door, knocking over a couple of first years as she went. She ran and ran, and following the trail further out into the forest. The pines grew thicker here. Their heavy branches bowed into the trail, slapping at Emmy's with sharpened blue needles. She kept running. The smell of the pines started mingling with something else, something she hadn't noticed before. Salt. Was Wellsworth near the ocean? The smell got stronger the further she ran. The ground felt soft and squishy, with patches of mud here and there. The trees were getting thinner, and soon she reached the forest's edge. She'd never seen anything like it. A wide valley of mud stretched out in front of her with 2 towering cliffs on either side. Layers of red rock were woven together with long bands of bright white and stretched across the cliff face. What's that white stuff? She muttered to herself. Chalk. Emmy jumped. Jonas, the man who had picked her up from the airport, was standing a few feet away. He was wearing thigh-high rubber boots and carrying a bucket with a rake resting on his shoulder. That white rock inside the cliffs is chalk. Makes for quite a pretty view, even though it'll all tumble down into the North Sea eventually. It will? Sure, every day the sea floods this valley, and when the tide goes back out, it takes a little more rock with it every day. One day the sea will still all of North Norfolk. Really? Emmy asked. Jonas chuckled. In a few thousand years, give or take. So what brings you out here, young miss? Emmy looked down and shrugged. She didn't want to talk about Victoria or school or her birthday. She didn't want to say that her mother had forgotten it again, or that she had to spend it without a father again. Jonas put down his bucket and started pulling his rake through the sand. After a few tries, his rake pulled up a clam, which he picked up and threw in the bucket. Something got you riled up? Emmy shrugged again. Jonas dropped another clam in his bucket. You know, I had a bit of a tough adjusting when I was in my first year. Most people were okay, but there were a few who were just impossible to get on with. I was lucky, though. I had a great roommate. Made all the difference. Emmy blinked black tears. Mine is horrible. I don't know how I'm going to live with her for the rest of the year. Maybe I should just go home. Maybe, Jonas said. Emmy looked up. She hadn't really expected him to agree with her. I guess it all comes down to what you got on your plate in the first place, Jonas says. It's like I said on your first day. You're the only one who knows if it's worth it. Emmy tucked her hair behind her ear. Her father's box was still sitting under the bed, right where she had put it on the first day. She'd been so busy she'd barely had time to think about it, let alone get it out. Besides, if Victoria found out about it, she'd probably trash it, just like her economics textbook. I don't give up. I don't want to give up, Emmy said, but I don't know what to do next. Plop! Another clam went into the bucket. I couldn't help but notice you usually sit with the same two people at lunch. One of the Galt boys, the Madame Boyd's daughter. Am I right? Emmy shook her head. I don't sit with Madame Boyd's daughter. Sure you do. Black hair from Glasgow. Can't remember her name. Emmy stared at Jonas. Lola? Lola, that's it, Jonas said. Lola Boyd. Emmy couldn't believe it. Lola was Madame Boyd's daughter? How could she have known that? Jonas threw another clam in the bucket. Can't be that easy having your mother as your head of house. And the Galt boy? It's John, isn't it? Jack, Emmy said. That's right, Jack. I don't think he's had the easiest time of it either. Might be worth having a chat with them. Emmy looked at the ground. She didn't usually confide in people. It's hard to find people you can trust, Jonas said. He threw in another clam in the bucket. Give them a chance and give Wellsworth a chance too. I think you'll be surprised. I bet by the end of the year Wellsworth will be in your blood, just like it is in mine. Emmy looked up. There were some things she liked about Wellsworth. She liked Jack and Lola, that was for sure. But the school itself, she didn't feel much of a connection to it. She'd never really felt connected anywhere. It seemed pretty unlikely that a place would ever be in her blood. Jonas flung his rake in new direction, and when it comes to that roommate, well, in my experience, bullies don't usually bother pushing people who push back. Jack and Lola were sitting in the common room when Emmy got back. They were playing a card game Lola had invented that involved a lot of slapping of piles and shoving the other person out of the way. You're not Madame Boyd's daughter, are you? Emmy asked. Lola snatched a stack of cards from Jack's side of the table. Took you this long to figure it out, did it? Same last name, same accent, same winning personality. She slapped her hand on a card and added it to one of her stacks. Jack laid out 4 more cards and just managed to get his hand on one before Lola grabbed it. Is it weird having your mum as your head of the house? Lola shrugged. It's not bad. I don't really know any different. Emmy chewed on her lip. There was something she'd been wondering about for a while, but she hadn't figured out if it was okay to ask. Your mum doesn't seem very old. Why does she walk with a cane? She was in an accident, Lola said. Tore the inside of her knee to shreds. There was a flurry of cards and both Jack and Lola emptied their stacks onto new ones. Jack pulled at his hair and groaned. Gotcha! Lola grinned and turned to Emmy. What about your mum? She writes books telling people all things they're doing wrong with their kids, right? Emmy laughed. Something like that. Do you hear from her much? Jack asked. Yeah, but not today. I think she forgot that today's my birthday. It's your birthday, Lola said. Why didn't you tell us? Emmy shrugged. I'm not really a birthday person. What about your dad? Did he send you anything? Asked Jack. No. Jack and Lola looked at her like they expected to say more. She tucked her hair behind her ear. She didn't have to say anything else, but Jonah's words kept coming back to her. Give them a chance. Give them a chance. She took a deep breath. My dad disappeared on my 3rd birthday. The police said it was really suspicious and that someone probably, Emmy swallowed, did something to him, but no one really knows for sure. But then, Jack hesitated, then he could have just left? Emmy didn't say anything. This was why she hadn't talked about her dad before. Because she didn't want to answer that question. Finally, she nodded. Maybe. The table went quiet. Lola tapped her cards and Jack kept running his fingers through his hair. Look, Lola said, I know it's not the same, but I know what it's like to miss my dad. And Jack, well, she glanced at Jack and he looked down at the table. He's never really known his dad at all. Not really. Jack nodded, but he didn't look up. I guess all I'm trying to say is, you're not alone here. Emmy pressed her eyes tight to keep any tears from falling. She'd never been any place where she didn't feel alone. Maybe she'd finally found one. Lola cleared her throat. All right, enough sappiness. It's making us all dreary and you can't have a lousy birthday this year. St. Audrey wouldn't approve. Come on, let's go to the feast. They stood up and were walking to the door when Victoria walked past and bumped extra hard into Emmy. She snickered and Emmy sighed. I'm so sick of her. Lola shook her head. You've got to stop letting her push you around. I tried. So try again, Lola said. Show her you're not some wishy-washy little girl. But how? Lola flashed a smile. Some people might punch her, but I frown on that sort of thing. Emmy laughed and felt a warm rush in her chest. She'd always wanted a friend who made her laugh like Lola did. Emmy followed them out the door, then stopped. Punching Victoria wasn't exactly her style either, but maybe there was something else she could do. She bit her lip and smiled. Aren't you coming? Jack asked. You can't miss out on a chance to eat an Audrey feast while the rest of us are stuck with plain old whole food. I'll catch up. There's something I need to do first. She dashed up the stairs and grabbed a pencil and pen from her backpack. Her economics textbook had been tossed on her bed, but thankfully the nail polish hadn't dribbled onto her bedspread. Emmy ignored her own book and rummaged through Victoria's textbooks until she found the one she was looking for, a pristine, barely opened copy of Economics for Third Form. She opened the cover and carefully erased Victoria's name, then wrote in a new one in pen. She grabbed the nail polish and soaked book, put it on Victoria's bed, and grinned as she wrote her roommate a note. Emmy dug into the feast with gusto, but after trying a pie that seemed to be filled with cold slabs of pork sitting in jello, she was a little more cautious. The Audrey girls brought leftovers to the common room and were sharing them with the Edmund boys when a piercing scream rang out from upstairs. A bunch of people ran to the stairs to see what was going on, but Emmy ignored them and popped a piece of marzipan-covered cake into her mouth. Victoria flew down the staircase and stomped over to Emmy. What is this supposed to mean? She waved a piece of paper in Emmy's face. Emmy cocked her head to one side. Just what it says. I borrowed your economics textbook this morning. What do you mean you borrowed my economics textbook? Victoria screeched. Well, I couldn't find mine, so I borrowed yours. I was coming back to return it when I accidentally dropped it on your toes. Sorry about that, by the way. Victoria held up the polished-soaked textbook. This is your book, not mine? It can't be. I have mine right here. Emmy held it up in a cream crisp economics textbook and pointed to the inside cover. See? Has my name in it. Victoria tried to open the front of her book, but the first pages were completely stuck together. That sure was a nasty spill, Emmy said sweetly. You ought to be more careful. Victoria clenched her jaw. You switched these books. I know you did. I don't know what you're talking about, but you're welcome to take your suspicions to Madame Boyd. I'm sure she'd love to hear all about how that little spill happened. She smiled and put on another slice of cake on her plate. Victoria stood there for a few moments before storming off, taking the ruined book with her. Jack and Lola stared at Emmy. Is that really your book? Jack asked. Of course not, Emmy whispered. She dumped nail polish in mine, so I switched them before dinner. Not like it was hard. I just erased her name and wrote mine in. That's why you should always use pen. Lola shook her head. Not bad for your first act of vengeance. Emmy's phone dinged. She pulled it out of her pocket and the new text message and sighed. What's up? Jack asked. For my mum, Emmy said, and she read the text out loud. Sorry I couldn't call, Em. I was filming all day, and I'm just about to get on a plane to Denver. I transferred some money into your account as a birthday present. Next year, I'll do something more special. I promise. Love you. Lola grinned. Cash? In your bank account? Well, that's not so bad, is it? Yes. Yeah, I guess. Cash was nice, but a phone call would have been nicer. And that was chapter 8. Stay tuned for chapter 9.